Welcome back, all my 40K fanatics out here. I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation to bring you another video for my cronies. That's right, we're playing Necrons tonight. And after playing the character list, we really enjoyed that thing, we're switching it over. As I said in one of the last couple videos, I wanted some suggestions. What are some things you wanted to see? Let's test some stuff out here, because like I said, everything's crazy till it wins a major event, or a GT. So this today actually comes from one of the opinions. With YouTube names and YouTube tags, I'm going to butcher them. There's a lot of things that you look at them and you look at names certain ways, and I'm just going to try my best. So please don't hate me if I get it wrong. But this list came in from Goothy Renker, I think is how we're going to go with today. And our good old buddy G there, G Renker, suggested death marks, 30 of them, in a Hypercrypt Legion. So this is an interesting concept because death marks are one of the few units in Necrons that has deep strike inherently. And with deep strike inherently means that they can be picked up and placed anywhere on the field, not just on a table as strategic reserve, because other units can only do that. Now, out of Hypercrypt, we do have the one command point stratagem that lets us place a unit anywhere on the field outside of 3 inches. That can be used for deep strike units, or they can be used for non-deep striking units to put them closer, or even just deep strike them in general, which is something that you'll see with a couple things in my list that will probably end up being targets for things like that. All in all, though, death marks are a very interesting unit. Death marks are the snipers of the Necrons. They have 1 shot apiece, strength 5, AP 2 for 2 damage, with precision. They are a 3-up ballistic skill, but the weapon has heavy, so if they do stand still, they can hit on 2s. On top of all this, they have a unique ability that allows each of the units, and now that's the kicker, each of the units. So if you land if you bring strategic reserves in, within 18 inches of these guys, and in line of sight, they can take a shot at you. This could be interesting, because as far as I read and as far as I see, if one unit lands within line of sight of all 3 squads of death marks, all 3 could shoot at them. So this could keep some heavy things like eradicators or things that could really do damage kind of wanting to play back a bit, because they can get hit so hard. And it's not even an Overwatch, so we could then pick something else to Overwatch with, particularly getting a lot more volume of shots during our opponent's movement phase, especially during those early reinforcement steps. So this is something interesting. I know people probably joked around about it a bit, but I personally have not seen this run yet. I have not seen 30 death marks, probably a lot because of how powerful Catans are. The current meta of Hypercrypt is still Catan focused, even though they can't access now the 1 command point strat to drop within 3 inches, because that was FAQ'd and errated recent as of the last update. It's not really too recent. It's been a while now. But they still are seeing a home. Still being able to pick them up and bring them further along the table, even if it's on the strategic reserve side of things. And the fact that they're just really bulky and really durable still has a lot of Hypercrypt Legions running multiple Catans, and it still does very well. But this, to me, feels like it's more in the spirit of what Hypercrypt was originally designed for. Even though, funny as it sounds, when I say this, I always laugh about this, because the spirit of Hypercrypt, to me, sounds like it should be more about the Necrons teleporting around and warriors and immortals and death marks in this example. It seems like that should be the spirit of it. But the image on the picture on the page, and even in the app and everything, is of the Void Dragon. So it's a Catan. So even if Games Workshop designed this army and did not have Catans in mind for people to be running in mass amounts with Hypercrypt, you put the Void Dragon right on the cover. So it's hard to say, is this really the spirit? To me, this is how the spirit of it feels it should be played, with more Necrons, less Catans. So little Catans that we will actually be running 0 Catans in this list. All right, enough talking. Let's get over to the list. I'm excited to play this thing today because I really do have some high hopes for it. I think it looks nice. Looks nice as far as what is in the army. Would need some painting work on it. And, well, I don't own 30 death marks, so we're going to have to make do with a little cosplay in here. All right, let's take a look. All right, everyone, here is my Hypercrypt. This is what I'll be bringing today. So, Hypercrypt, as you know, you can pick up 3 units at the end of your opponent's turn. So if you go second, you could actually do this on your first game turn and bring them in on turn 1. And then those units that you picked up come in from Strategic Reserve. We do have the strat, like I talked about, for 1 command point to bring a unit in wholly within 3 inches. And I did take the enhancement hanging out on my Chronomancer to allow me to pick up 1 additional unit when I go to do this, which I think is going to be very valuable. If not, I might switch over to the Deep Strike enhancement for someone else. I don't have that in this list right now. That's the only enhancement I have in here. But we're still in the testing phase. This will be the very first time this list is hitting the table. So, starters. We have the big boy himself, the Silent King. Silent King has awesome shooting. I was very impressed with him, and I think I have not run him enough to really appreciate how good he really is. In combat, he's a little lacking. 12 attacks that are strength 8, AP 3, maybe, AP 2, AP 3, 2 flat damage. So not a lot there, but shooting, he is a gunboat with so many shots. 2 shots that are 3 damage, 12 shots that are 1 damage but indirect fire capability, and then the 2 big rocks that put the big flat 6 high strength, high AP damage shots down. This guy is going to be very helpful in the anti-tank game, but he can also clear infantry very nicely, especially things hiding out behind a wall. He's big, he's bulky, and he comes with auras. Most importantly with this list is going to be the base aura that gives him all Necron units reroll 1s to hit and wound within 6 inches of him. It's going to be very big for a lot of things with this army. Next up, we have 2 Catacomb Command Barges. So Death Marks can't be led by characters. What Catacomb Command Barges do is they allow me to have a Resurrection Orb that can target things like the Death Marks. They can target other things as well, anything that has the infantry keyword, or mounted for that matter. Infantry keyword. I don't think they can do the mounted. I know they give the plus OC to the mounted. I'd have to double check on that. I think it's only infantry that they can target with the Res Orb, pop, and give them an extra D6 models back at the end of any phase. On top of that, these ones are going to also come with the Gauss Cannons and the Staff of Light. So they're going to be hanging out back and just kind of shooting. As well as, like I just said, they also give an additional +1 OC to any unit within 6 inches of them, which will be nice for the Death Marks to go from OC1 to OC2, and the Lich Guard as well. Moving over, we have the 2 Canopic Reanimators. So Canopic Reanimators, after we got a Codex, kind of shifted out into no man's land. Canopic Reanimators don't really get run because they got much smaller aura effect, and we have a lot of other detachments and other abilities, so these guys kind of went to the shelves, but I don't think they're completely unplayable and terrible. It's just there's other good things in Necrons. This is a time where I thought it would be valid to bring them off the shelf, as I think that in Pariah Nexus, these guys might be a little bit more of a hidden gem. Number one, their biggest thing is that they give that boosted reanimation, but only to units within 3 inches. Well, Hypercrypt can kind of speed these guys up. Even if I'm not deep striking them, I can still bring them in from strategic very close to these units that are going to get hit later on. These guys are vehicles. Hypercrypt has a 1 command point strat that gives these guys a 4-up invul. That means they're a 4-up invul with a 4-up feel no pain, making these guys kind of annoying to have to take down. If you've run a Luminar Xeris, you know how difficult that 4-up invul and 4-up feel no pain can be for units to tear through. Also, these guys do not need to shoot to do their main ability for the popping the extra reanimations whenever something reanimates. So these guys can complete actions. 75 points. I think these guys actually might have a bit of play in there, especially for completing secondary missions and stuff like that. Next up, we'll go over to the Hex Mark Destroyers. So I think these guys kind of fit in theme. They're a deep strike unit. And as we move along, these guys are really awesome for that secondary game. So we have the Reanimators and these guys that can do the secondaries very well. Single model with lone op that can drop in and just do a little damage to some infantry and just hide and complete secondaries. Things like sabotage that need to go all the way to my opponent's end of turn. These guys can hide really well and stay alive to be able to complete that secondary. On top of it, they have deep strike inherently. So with Hypercrypt, I can drop these guys down somewhere where they're completely out of the game and then bring them back into the game later on by picking them up and deep striking them back down. So a strong utility as well with the Reanimators. Reanimators are going to have kind of a bigger bullseye on them, so they'll get shot at. These guys would be a little bit harder to get rid of, but this is now a 4 units that can complete secondaries that require actions to be done, and there's quite a few that are in different zones, so I think these guys will be very nice for that. Oh, let's continue talking about secondaries. We'll go over to our single Locust Destroyer. Not much to say here. He's cheap. Super cheap. Super cheap for a single OC2 model. He's going to go in strategic. He's going to float on the table wherever I need him, that there is nothing else. Maybe hold an objective, maybe complete some actions. But the thing is, he's just super, super cheap for 3 wounds on a T6 body. And that's really all there is to him. No other really fanciness there. It is just a 5th model and unit to be able to do secondaries and also hold points later in the game that I may not want to dedicate a lot to. He may just come home to my home field objective and zone out back there, since my starting home field unit has a lot of utility. And let's jump over and talk about them. We have 5 Immortals, led by a Chronomancer. This is what some of my buddies have referred to as the Tim Special. This unit, I love out of Hypercrypt. So the Tesla gives them assault weapons so they can advance and shoot. But more importantly, it's the fact that the Chronomancer lets them move after they shoot. This is a unit that can come on from strategic near an objective marker, shoot, doesn't matter what it does, and then move an OC2 unit onto that objective for a steal. Spending 1 command point on these guys is also a good option to drop them within 3 inches, shoot, and then scoot everybody else onto the objective to steal it from my opponent. This small squad can cost my opponent an entire turn of primary just by dropping them in. For the early points of the game, they'll probably just hold my home field objective, because their power really comes later into the game when they're able to just slam in there and take something on an OC2, just take something for their OC2 value away from a smaller, less objective controlled unit that might be able to wipe them, but doesn't have the OC value to back them up. And last of these units for mission play like that is going to be the Flayed Ones. So the Flayed Ones are something that I placed in here kind of to play into my if I go first aspect, since this army doesn't have a lot of play out of going first. With that, these guys have infiltrate. So they're going to be able to zone out an area that I want to hold for additional primaries, for a mission, for an objective. These guys give me a little bit of room there and be able to put that unit on there when I'm not able to hypercrypt anything else, as well as zoning out that area so we don't get deep struck on over there, and can start to give us kind of a point to build our army and move into to start to mount our offense. That's really about it with these guys. They have stealth, but there's only 5 of them, so they get pasted pretty quickly. However, they do have infiltrate, as I mentioned, which means they can get up there and zone out early and be in a good position from the start of the game. Transitioning over, we're going to talk about the 10 Lich card with an Overlord with Translocation Shroud. This would be a unit I would consider in the future putting that Deep Strike enhancement on, but right now we don't have it. So this unit, these Lich Guard are super defensive. 3 up, 4 up, toughness 5, reduce damage or reduce wounds to wound roll by 1 on them if they're led by a character and if the strength is heavier. So it's a little transhuman physiology on these guys. Now, what I like about these guys is they can help hold my home field if I decide to make a early play with my Immortals. On top of that, a lot of times that home field objective marker doesn't really help for scoring points. So it doesn't really make much sense for me to hold the home field objective marker outside of preventing my opponent to drop in until I can move and start staging. After that, this is a unit that can just simply walk up the middle and go at the center objective. The reason I gave him the Translocation Shroud is because of the auto advance 6. Being able to pick these guys up and move that far, moving that big of a distance to go onto an objective. Even though OC1, we have Catacomb Command Barge to help them get to OC2, but we can get these guys onto an objective, and even if they don't charge because they advanced, their presence and how bulky they are can just sit on that objective and hold it, especially mid to late game. That's the role I really like these guys for. They're not necessarily something that's going to get picked up in the Hypercrypt per se. There's something that's probably going to be able to just move directly from my deployment zone right at center field and go towards middle objective to fight out there, unless someone has a massive presence at the middle that I would never even hope to take over. As I mentioned, this army is also going to be running 30 death marks. Now, in this picture, I've only pictured 10 of them. The reason being is, well, I don't own 30 death marks yet. Yet being the operative word. If I really like this list, I may just have to go out and get them, or do some conversions. But for this test, we are going to be using 20 Necron warriors of different color and completion, so I can keep them. I know who's in what squad, because when I start dropping everybody in, they might get congested. So I want to make sure that for this first test game, when I'm trying to figure out ways to have etiquette so that I don't accidentally pull models from the wrong units, I know which ones are in which unit that are getting shot at. It's a good thing to try to do when you're running multiple units, to have some way to distinguish which ones are in which when they get close together. For right now, we're just using the different models until I see how this works and if I like this. And then, you know, some conversions might come in and stuff like that to keep them separated. As I mentioned, these guys are snipers. They come with deep strike. I talked about them a lot in the intro on how these guys function. You know, being able to shoot at units that arrive from reserve, strength 5, AP 2 damage on the sniper, precision, heavy, and deep strike. Big thing about that deep strike, the fact that they can pick up and land back anywhere else is going to be big. These guys will most likely start on the table. I am considering putting one in strategic reserve. I think that might be a good place for it, just so that on my turn 2, if I go into a turn 2 hit, I can pick something else up with the Hyper Crypt's ability. And last, but surely not least, we have 3 Locust Heavy Destroyers. These are with the Gauze Destructors, and I took my converted models that have the I thought it was fitting that I converted over with the Death Marks gun. You know, I thought it was fitting for this list. These guys are having the Gauze Destructor, so big cannons, big damage, anti-vehicle. I have a lot of anti-infantry across the board, from the Silent Kings, 12 shots, to the Catacomb command barges and their guns. Even the Death Marks are more suited for infantry, and the Tesla on the Immortals even. We need something to be able to hit home against vehicles, and the manures off the Silent King are not going to be enough. These guys can do the trick. Now, I like taking these guys in a 3-man instead of separately, because at least when 1 gets hit or 2 get hit, I can start playing reanimation games and bringing these guys back, and it gets silly. You know, hide for a turn, start resurrecting. It can get real silly, especially if there's a reanimator nearby. So yeah, that's pretty much it for them, and that is pretty much it for the list. So a couple little housekeeping things I want to throw in here. First of all, this list. I have a couple concepts and ideas of how this thing is going to run, of what's going to get picked up with each of these. I'm thinking 1 reanimator on table, 1 in reserve. This way I can pick up a reanimator if I do go second and move it in with the king and a couple death marks and get into a better position to start shooting. That's one of the biggest early plays I have for it. As far as the later plays, that's going to be really dictated on how the table goes, how things flow with everything. If I need to bring the heavy destroyers up with the hypercrypt ability, or can they just float? They have a good range, so they may never need that. Catacomb command barges as well. I may need to pick them up, or one of them up, to bring them over by the death marks to have that good support on an objective for wherever they hit. So a lot of this army is just going to be starting in one spot to stay safe. And then once I pick up and get into more areas, I'm going to be able to stage and start making the pressure and pressuring on points. So it's going to be interesting to see how, you know, these death marks function, especially as snipers, and having 30 of them, seeing how this can work. Is this going to be able to pick characters up off of units and really just kind of start crippling my opponent by being able to take characters out before they're ready for them to lose them. So I do like this. I'm very interested to see how this build goes, and then make modifications as we see fit, as we go with it. Because the thing that's interesting about death marks is, for what they do and their ability, they're actually rather cheap. You know, they're cheaper than Immortals. First of all, they don't have the OC or the combat potential, but they have more range, and a different role. And that role comes out of shooting. So this is one that's a little, like I said, there's more skewed over to shooting, but they do it pretty well. And I'm definitely curious to see how 30 of them really can roll. I think it'll be definitely an interesting game, to say the least. And also reanimators and stuff. I have a lot of units, a lot more than I usually field into it. Like six and a half units that are really heavy on being able to do secondaries with the flayed ones, the reanimators, the one squad of Immortals, and the Hex Marks. So I should be able to do really good on secondaries. It's a matter of keeping the primaries, which I may not have enough push to get onto those. That was kind of the reason for the Lich Guard, to have a unit that is a combat unit to make the push. In a lot of scenarios, they may advance and just sitting on an objective, but we'll see how that goes. I considered score packs, but I figure score packs are just they're not quite as bulky as the Lich Guard are. So that was why I went with them for this run. But, so that's it. That's the list. Now, like I said, a little bit of housekeeping here. So I know my photography has been light lately, and I respect that no one has actually called me out on it. Here's what's going on with that. And I pose this as a question. I have a photography area, and for lack of better words, I think my lack of knowledge has made it quite poor. So I want to advance that. Right now, that area is covered in World Eaters because I've been working on those guys a lot. So hopefully I'll have them in a better position to clear a lot of the World Eaters off. And then I want to start redesigning my photography area to be more efficient. So anyone who can point me in the direction of some good links, videos, anything like that, to start talking about better photography of models and how to do this stuff better. I have some lights, so I'm like, mildly budget, but I mean, we're taking pictures of standstill things, so I should be okay with some of that. It's just some of the other concepts and design and how to make the area more functional. So that's something definitely, if anyone throws some advice in there, please, by all means, love to have that. The World Eaters are coming along, so we're still working on those. That's why a lot of other stuff isn't painted. We're working on those guys. Hopefully you'll like those. I'm making some progress, but with the babies and back at work, it gets tough. I swear. Today was a day where I sat down to paint, and it was like you see in the TV shows where as soon as I remember, was it How I Met Your Mother? Every time Marshall and Lily were trying to have some adult time, once he would put his hand on Lily, the baby started crying. And I feel like that's what happens here. Every time I touch paint, the baby starts crying. So, but we're making progress. We are getting through it. All right. Well, that's it for today. We'll see what Lane brings with his army tonight. I'm not sure. I think he's bringing Marines, I think what it is. And yeah, ready to fight tonight. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.